Hello, Kiannaa Sadge here, bringing you a series on manipulation, energy discord, and stress. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And the reason is because I have experienced a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. And I want to be really clear, the purpose of this particular series is to share what most people don't talk about, which is how their energy fields are basically hijacked. And I'm going to talk about all the questions that might come up in your head, that came up in my head, and then share some data as to what it is that is doing the hijacking. And then I'm going to share some processes or some things that you may want to consider adding into your repertoire. So if you have been hijacked, you have some resources. My intention in this series is to provide insight and guidance to those who might be suffering with their energy being manipulated or hijacked. And I want to start by saying my own personal experience of this. And my energy field, I've always been very intuitive and sensitive, and I noticed something was off 7 years ago, or probably 8 years now. So there was a good period of time where I knew something was just off, and then about 2 years in, trying to fix it, I knew some stuff was really off. So I wanted to give you some details of, how I knew some stuff was off. First of all, I started having like these mysterious medical issues, just stuff that was really, what I would say random. Like I would go to the doctors and the doctors had no idea what was causing my issue. And this particular medical, there was more than one, but this particular medical issue went on for like 9 months, and I must have seen probably close to 10 different doctors, none of which was able to really identify what the issue was. Within those 10 doctors, I got some really far out there diagnosis. And the prescription medicines that they prescribed were beyond what would be recommended by other medical professionals. So for example, if one doctor would say, hey, take a Z-Pak for 10 days, these doctors were telling me to take it for 45. And the side effects of those medicines would have really just created havoc within my system. So really unusual things. And I was lucky that I was intuitive, because I was finding doctors that were able to speak to me in a language that I would understand. Like, hey, if you were my wife, you would not be doing this. And I was able to course correct quite quickly. So mysterious things started happening with doctors and the way that they were treating me. And then what I also started to notice was just very unusual thought patterns that were not my way of thinking. So like I'd walk by a mirror and I would think thoughts that were not nice or kind, but were definitely out of my norm. And I noticed that, but I just didn't really understand why that was occurring. And then the other thing is anger. Anger is something that could go easily from 0 to 100 as far as angry about things that were really not essential, not important, not something that would really require that type of outrage. And I will admit that in my past I would be easily angered, however, not to these extremes. I would just be really upset, and I'd be fine 1 minute, and then the next minute I would just be really triggered, and it didn't make sense. Just like your blood is boiling, and then I would literally get hot, physically hot, and it just didn't make sense. So these things had been transpiring for about 2.5, 3 years. And the medical diagnosis, that was a good year before all those things started happening. So we got 2 years now, going on 3. And then the confirmation for me, I had been trying, you know, traditional medicine and also alternative methods, because I knew what was off balance in my body was definitely influencing me in my way of living. My whole entire way of being was completely influenced. And so I was trying pretty much anything and everything. And so one day I went to go to the store to get some crystals, because I was told that crystals can be a good way of helping you to balance out your energy. So I had a list of potential crystals that could help me. And I go into the crystal store, and you know, there's a few people around, and the owner of the store happened to be there, which was good because they were very knowledgeable. And they said, oh, you need these things. So I told them what I wanted, and then they said, oh, you might want to try these things. So I don't remember exactly what crystals or rocks and that I picked up. But one was considered what is considered a protection rock. It wasn't something that was common like quartz. It was tourmaline, I think. It's something like that. Anyways, I picked up this crystal and I was looking at it, and it was like a decent sized rock, maybe the size of my finger, the circle. And I picked it up, and it literally exploded in my hand, went all over the store. I mean, it was like nothing I had ever seen. And that was a protection stone. And it was definitely confirmation to me that I was going in the right direction, in that this was not something that was normal for most people to have a crystal explode in their hands. So needless to say, I got that crystal because I knew I needed some of it to have some type of protection. But I will say that that the owner actually gave me some recommendations of some other crystals too. And he also, at that time, had identified what I had been knowing, is that somebody was doing some manipulation in my energetic field. And so having gone there for the crystals definitely gave me confirmation on my path. And so I want to talk about energy discord and stress, because that's essentially what happens. But what causes that? And the causes are the part that makes this type of video difficult to share, is because this isn't stuff that you can necessarily see unless you're gifted in seeing like that, but it is something that you feel. And if you go to medical doctors, they have their traditional way of looking at things, and energy isn't one of them. They look at EKGs, which monitors the energy of your heart, which is energy. However, they're not skilled in looking at your energy field and the patterns that are running and what is in discord and stress and what's causing that. Some of the root causes, I think, may shock you. So that's what I'm going to go into in part 2 and part 3 of this series. But before I go into that, I wanted to share some of the alternative approaches that I tried. The norm, like acupuncture. I definitely use homeopathic. I believe in homeopathic care, was definitely pivotal in assisting a lot of my growth and maintaining some semblance of balance. But I think when you start to work with healers, you know, there's a lot of them that work in what is a protection mode. And so they're very afraid of what I'm going to talk about in the later sessions, which is really entity attachments and egregors and earthbound human spirits, and essentially, you know, conducting what I consider a modern day exorcism. It's not like what you saw in the movie, which I think gives these energies, makes people scared and they don't want to look at them, because what you see in the movie was quite horrendous. And to be honest with you, that is what happens when you have the worst things happening. I'm going to talk about that. So healers working in us, they usually will not be able to remove the energy, the source of the problem, if they are working from a place of protection. Because if you're working from a place of protection, you're also working from a space of fear. And if you're in fear of something, then the energy is already going towards that which you're trying to remove. So I wouldn't suggest working with healers in that way. But it also, what I noticed in my own personal experience, and I couldn't find any healers that worked in removing of entities at all. In fact, I didn't even know what I had was entity attachments until 3-4 years into it. And I had to learn how to do all this for myself because nobody was out there talking about it, which is why I wanted to produce and give access to these types of videos, to share my own personal experience and, you know, how this really put me in a position to become an expert in something I never imagined becoming an expert in, because there's a lot of people out there with a ton of knowledge on what I'm talking about entity attachments and how your energy fields are manipulated. However, what I found for me in particular is that they were so far out there. I mean, the things that they were talking about were very informational and helpful. However, they didn't seem grounded in any kind of love, balance. They were totally into the energy of whatever it is they were talking about. And that was really not helpful. So I tried to discern what I could from other people that I learned, but essentially what I'm going to be sharing with you is, you know, my own experience and knowledge of what I've been through, and maybe it'll help you. And I know since my experience, many of my clients have entities and they don't know that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that shows up for some of my clients, you know, because in the beginning when I started this, I was not an expert in entity removal. But now that I understand how it shows up, what the patterns look like, I ask the questions, I know how to clear it. And it's super, for the most part, it's very easy to clear it. What is problematic is the magnitude of how this influences your life. Because when you have energy stressors and discord in your field caused by these other entities or attachments, the magnitude of distress on the physical body is enormous. On the behaviors, it's exponential. But it's also just very difficult to comprehend because it seems so far-fetched, because we don't talk about these things. So what I would say is oftentimes healers that are not working from a place of integrity also give these attachments and send them to their clients for repeat business. So I wish this weren't true, but this is what I found. And I have heard that from other people who have had this experience. And I think it's very unfortunate because you don't know who you're already in a really bad situation. Then you go to somebody for help and they make things worse. So you definitely just want to really listen to yourself and to check resources and to use your best judgment. Doctors, psychologists, they don't treat these things because they don't understand them, and for more often than not, it's very scary and frightening because it's something they don't understand, as you can imagine. So I want to talk in general terms in this part. And I'm going to call this still part 1. In general terms, the best thing to do is to know what is an attachment. And an attachment, whatever name you want to put on it, and there are plenty of names to put on these things. Essentially, it's a dark energy that breeds more darkness. In simple terms, that's all it is. And you might want to know, like, where does it attach? And the simple truth is it'll attach anywhere it can. It could be in your energy field. It could be in your physical body. Oftentimes it'll get into your intestines, your colon, your liver, your kidney. I mean, they will attach anywhere they possibly can. And they get in through portals and openings in your energy field. And I think this part is very helpful for people to know. Because portals in your energy field, what they do is they create a gap, or a vulnerability is another word, or they create a disability. And it's something that you probably can't even see. You feel it, maybe. You feel when you're vulnerable to certain things coming in. But that's basically what happens in your energy field. And then once it gets into your body, it's been in your field for quite some time, and the hole or the gap is quite significant, and that's how it enters. So let's talk about the ways in which entities can attach and grow and expand. So I've talked to clients that might have just one entity, and I've worked with clients that had 30 plus entity. I had a 9-year-old little autistic boy who had over 30 entities that we removed to address the behavioral issues that were coming up. So this is a real situation, because people with disabilities or vulnerabilities like an autistic child will have gaps in their energy field where these things can enter. And although the parents think they're treating this behavioral issue, the issue was actually being caused by an energy attachment. And after it was removed, the behaviors changed. So it's very common with autistic kids to have almost like an OCD type of behavior, where they do patterns before they go to sleep, or when they wake up, or before they go to do something, those types of behaviors. And immediately after the entities were removed, that went away. So there are little things like that where you think they're just your kid, or you just how you are, but it's actually being caused by something else. And in part 2, I'm going to go over like the different ways and levels in which influence happens. So 5 main ways that entities attach. And the number one is through our thoughts. So the thoughts that we think are very important, and they can influence entities attaching. So if you have a lot of unworthiness or self-hate, and those in and of itself won't cause it, but the thoughts that you think about yourself constantly absolutely could. Your emotions. Many people have traumas that have been unprocessed and not confronted or acknowledged in a proper way, and therefore the lack of doing so gives the entities a breeding ground. Any disconnection that we might have from source energy, so that could be God, Gaia, Earth, whatever it is for you, any disconnection that you have from source energy will provide an opening for this type of discord. Encounters with evil. I would say that's how I got mine. I did not know at all what I was dealing with was pure evil on this earth. Had no idea. Because it didn't look like what I thought evil would look like. And it didn't feel like what I thought evil would feel like. Although that's what it was. It was pure evil, total manipulation, total discord, not congruent in any way. Uses your words and your energy patterns against you. And that's how I received all my attachments. Incongruent patterns. So, the simplest example of that would be, you say you're going to do something and you don't do it. So that would be an incongruent. So people who don't honor their word, if you notice that you don't honor your word, If you have incongruent patterns in your behavior, so for example, the anger, incongruent with who I was. Doctor's advice was incongruent with who I was. Those types of things. The stories that you tell yourself is a way that entity attachments can root. And those are what keep you separate from source. So a question that you might be wondering is, how do you know if you have an entity attachment? And the first thing I will say is that you will have a knowingness, like deep inside you, like, I know something's off. You may not know what it is, but you have a knowing, and that will tell you. For me personally, I can also tell with my clients and my friends and family members or people that I encounter by their behaviors. I can feel and sense their incongruence in a person. That's one of my gifts as a healer, is to really sense that within somebody. But you may have those gifts as well. So you can sense the incongruence within people, and also by watching their behavior. The other way that you can know if you have an attachment is just to ask. I ask before I work with a client. I don't ask the client, I ask the client's energy and higher self, is there an entity attachment? I could usually sense it via an email or a text, or even on the phone within moments. I can sense an attachment in how people are describing their story, because the stories tell a lot about who we are. So that's in general part one. Just, my story and the basics of entity attachment, earthbound human spirits. And there's a lot of words that may be new for you, and you can go Google them and learn more. I'm not intending to give you all of the information. I just want to put some information out to help you.